I left Airborne, and then the next match they beat Renegades, and I was like, oh, this is like quite depressing. Dexter comes, boys, Dexter comes, and we're like really calm them around, and then we win like any round, and we're like, nice, let's fucking go, boys, we're doing it, we're Renegades. There's a group chat on Twitter with me in it, all of my team, and Tom just like makes the group chat, says like, hey, would anyone like to join Cheers? Oh, I didn't mean to invite you, Toby.
So this is going to be in retrospect with Toby Bantz, who is an Australian in-game leader. He plays for Vertex, and I would say, I think actually you're one of the more successful modern-day IGLs. But the first question that I have for you is, why does everyone always say Toby Bantz? Because it seems like every time someone talks about you, talks to you, they always say Toby Bantz. So where does that come from?
Yeah, it was one of my like friends and like old teammates, Falcon. Just he has like a very funny way of speaking. And every single time he like says it, he used to say it to me like just when we're in TeamSpeak. He was like, Toby, relax. You're gonna be all good. You are Toby Bantz. And then it kind of just caught on within our team, it's just being a joke. And then anytime he ever tweeted, he just tweeted like Toby Bantz or in Twitch chat. And it kind of just like caught on, I think, just because it's like a dumb thing to say.
Yeah. I mean, what I think it is, it just like rolls off the tongue really nice, you know? So it's like, oh, Toby Bantz, you can like say it in like 5 seconds, or even, you know, you can say it so quickly and so easily, and it sounds so good. But anyway, Toby Bantz, right? I feel like for you, your career, or a lot of your identity almost in the last couple of years, has been like being an in-game leader and that kind of thing. So I wanted to actually know, like, when did this kind of start? When did you actually start becoming an in-game leader? Because I'm sure initially when you started playing CS, it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to go in and be an IGL from the outset. Or were you always sort of in this role?
So, like for when I started playing and like even like just CGA and playing like scrims with my friends, I was pretty like brain dead entry fragger. Like we just had like one person who fought for everyone, and we'd all just like we knew like 2 strats on like every map or something, and we'd all just try to practice them. But I think at the time when I was living in Sydney at home, I had a pretty bad computer, and for some reason we couldn't get Ethernet in my house, so I was playing on like Wi-Fi dongles. Um, and like my FPS was horrible, my internet, I just had like loss all the time, so I was a pretty bad player, but I still wanted to like keep on like moving up the ranks. And one of my friends was in a CGI team and they needed an IGL, and they really just couldn't find anyone to IGL. And to jump from like CGA to CGI, I just said like, yeah, I can call. I've done it before, and I just joined and was just like calling for the first time in like CGI or whatever. And from that point on, it was just always easiest for me to like stay at that level on the really scuff setup, just if I was calling, because I didn't have to like drop 30 kills. You know, I could play with basically anyone because there's no callers in Oz.
Yeah, indeed. And actually, that kind of leads into my next question, which was like, obviously, as far as IGLs in Australia are concerned, like, where do you actually think you kind of sit? I mean, I'm talking just in general, not like specific day, not like modern day. I'm just talking like, are you like a top 5 IGL? Are you a top 10 IGL? Where do you think you'd roughly just be ranked within AU and NZ and going back in the history of CSGO at least?
I think it's tough because I've only really, since I've been competitive, I think I've been one of the better IGLs like the whole time. Like since uh basically like we joined Vertex. I think the style we played has always been like hasn't been the best all the time, but like compared to the other callers, it's been a lot better. Um but obviously I don't think I've had as much international success as some of the other big callers. But I do think I definitely had to be up there just with like the rise of our like the Vertex team coming from like basically nothing to like what we are today, which I feel like is like a pretty consistent like top 2, like top 3 team like over the last like 2 or yeah, probably 2 years now. I don't know.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's actually something that I want to get into, obviously, that Vertex rise, and that's definitely something that we'll cover. But before we go too deep into that, I also wanted to sort of just quiz you on, I mean, because one of the difficult things, right, as a caster and as anyone viewing CS is like, how do you like rate an IGL? Do you know what I mean? Like, how do I look at the game and say, oh, Brace is doing a really good job today, versus Brace is having a shit day as an IGL? So how do you think how would you rate an IGL from the outside perspective? Do you think it's easy? Do you think it's possible to really rate an IGL? Or is it just impossible because we don't know what's being said in the server?
I think it's hard if you have like if you don't have like competitive like calling experience like in the meta, like within the last like 4 years, and you have like no insider knowledge. I think it's pretty hard to tell unless the team's playing super like structured and strategy. Like I think if you're watching a team like doing a lot of like pace changes and like they're like calling the context really well, they're like not going into stacks and they're getting like strong executes off. I think it's like easy for a caster to say like, yeah, that caller is doing a good job.
Mm,
But if you're playing like a more like defaulty, consistent style, it kind of depends a lot on like how good the players are playing on the day and like their ability to uh relay information to the caller so they can make good calls so you're not running into a stack mid round, or even just like just stay alive and just not die to aggro things when we're not going for a kill. Um, but yeah, I think it's pretty tough if you're a caster and you haven't been like I think like Pilly like for example in Australia like he would find it way easier than like your Mac would to tell like
mm,
who's like doing well as a game leader and who's
mm,
not.
mm. Who would you say you want to like learn from, or do you look to anyone and like look over their gameplay or anything like that?
Yeah, I think in different times it's been like different players. Different teams. Um, I'd say like right now I'm not really like taking a lot from like uh one team, just because I feel like in Australia, uh, it's really obvious when a team's just copying one team. Like for example, like if you just go in and you're like screaming nuke, just because like with competitive teams scream each other so much, and you just see they're like, yeah, they're just running all of like Ence's like nuke, or they're just running like all of Gambit's rounds. Um, you can kind of just watch the teams that beat the actual teams and like copy what they do, or you know what rounds they're gonna like bring into matches. Um, but yeah, I like to take like a lot of ideas. I think like the obvious ones are like heroic,
Mm.
like everyone takes like a lot from. I feel like, um, but there's some other more niche teams we try like, which I feel like have really good ideas, which we take a fair bit from.
The first era that I want to talk about with you about is the Mark and Larry era. I want to call it the Mark and Larry era because it was a bit of a tumultuous time, all right. And I don't even know if this was like a legit team or if this was just a pug team or whatever it was at the time, because it seemed like you guys went through so many different iterations of this roster, and you were in Justice for a little bit and this and that, and then there was a bunch of other teams and stuff like that. But this sort of feels like it's kind of like where your career as a CS player kind of starts. So, I mean, first of all, why was the team actually called Mark and Larry? Because to my understanding, no one on that team was called Mark or Larry.
Yeah. So we had like a team before, um, and basically I just started playing with like Sam or like Fam.
Mm,
Uh, and for anyone who's ever like talked to Fam, he's just like one of the funniest people like you'll ever talk to. Like he's just always positive, and like compared to the good players I'd played with before that, or like good like relative, um, he was like the only one who seemed like a normal person. It was fun to be around. And we kind of together we decided to like build this team around the idea of like let's just like get like people we like and we'll like play together and it'll be like an enjoyable experience. Like we're not like the idea of a team wasn't like go like pro, and like
mm,
go like make the major. So we're playing with like me, PZ, Fam, and in like the pugs, uh, we played with like Roflko, and he would just like bark like a dog with Fam the whole time. And it was just like so like obscene, but we're like, we can't have a bad time with this guy as well. So we get like Roflko, and then we build the team, and we had like four like pretty outgoing guys, and at the time we also had Peasy, who was like
mm.
kind of shy, but he had like a pretty like unique sense of humor. But we didn't know that much about Jordy at the time. But he just kept on laughing at this photo of like Mario without a mustache, which he found on Reddit,
Okay,
and that was like they called it instead of Mario and Luigi, it was like Mark and Larry, and
right.
Jordy just found it fucking hilarious. So all of us just thought, I was like, yep, that's our team name now,
I see.
and we kind of just committed to it.
Okay, so Mark and Larry, basically, as you've mentioned already, is Brace, Roflko, PZ, Falcon, Tham initially, or at least for the most part. And you play with this roster for, I felt like it was like, 6 months or so until you get picked up by Justice. And I actually remember watching you when you qualified to your first international event with whatever ANZ Champs season it was. You were doing the interview in there, and you actually specifically mentioned this Mark and Larry roster. You said, I was playing with, because I think at the time you qualified with Roflko. And speaking of which, this is a bit of an aside, a bit of a tangent, but I feel like a lot of people look at your career and say, okay, it's Brace and Peasy. Like Brace and Peasy are like the power duo, right? You guys have gone through this Vertex era your whole time together and whatever. But maybe what people don't necessarily know is like the OG duo for Brace was actually Roflko. Like you guys played in so many teams together. You came through this sort of scene together. So anyway, that's a bit of an aside. But you said on that interview in ANZ Champs, you said these were like, we were probably the 5 worst players in CS in Australia. So what was it like actually at the time? What was it like to play in this team? Was it just like a shit show basically from start to finish?
Kind of. It was like Peasy, just from the start, he was just very good. I feel like uh his like base understanding of a game, and he just had it off, which is just makes it easier. Was pretty good. And it was also someone who was very calm when he played, which at the time was not the strong suit of a lot of our players. So like he would be making rational decisions all the time, and some of our other teammates, like I remember James, like Roflko, for like the longest time, he hated being last alive because he thought like, not that we had like a toxic team environment, but he didn't want other people to think he was bad, like and making bad decisions when he clutches. So he always just tried to die before like he was last alive.
Yeah, so he didn't want to be judged, right, in the clutch or something like that.
Yeah, he didn't want to be judged. But uh yeah, we weren't like the best individuals, but like everyone really wanted to like play as a team. They weren't like we weren't like super good at playing as a team at the time, but like we came to practice every day. We're like running offline, um, and we're trying to play like a style which like would let us improve. I think a big thing for me at the time was I realized we weren't gonna be like a relevant competitive team off the bat. But I wanted to make it into MDL and just scrim a style which would like let everyone improve. Um, and I thought the way of doing that at the time, and I still think it's a really good way of just like player development if you're not very good, is just defaulting like all the time because you're like exposed to so many like mid-round decisions. Um, but because like I was saying, we weren't the best players and we're defaulting all the time, like people were like getting picked left and right, like we're making bad reactions. We didn't have the best protocols. Um, but there was a lot of things like basic fundamentals people just didn't know as well.
Yeah.
Like people's movement was just like pretty rough. Some people's like just didn't know like how to like counter strafe and things like that. I feel like everyone's comms were like everyone was like trying to come pretty well, but it was mainly like just like playing the game. Like my spray, for example, was horrible. Like I would just whiff like 20 bullets like every time I tried to spray someone. It was insane. So everyone had some quirk which made them like not a rounded out player. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, I guess if we go through the history of this roster, and this is where things kind of get a little bit wacky, right? Because I was looking at your history on Liquipedia, and it just seems like there's like absolute roster mania throughout like the second half of 2019. And I don't even know if the intention, again, necessarily was to be like a proper team. But I just want to run you through some of these rosters that you played on, right? So obviously we talked about that Mark and Larry roster. You get picked up by Justice. At that point, Racos replaced Falcon. So you played a little bit with him. And then after that season of ANZ Champs, you played with Vexite, Dreams, and Rewind. And that's, I think, the point where PZ then left to go to Airborne. I'm just taking all this off of Liquipedia, so it may or may not be 100% correct and accurate. But yeah, you want to talk about this Racos thing? I feel like you want to say something there.
Yeah, this is one of the funniest stories like of our team. So at the time, again, like a big thing of a team was like we weren't like trying to like be like the best. We were just trying to like have a good time and like improve together. So Geordie was really good, but Geordie was like at the time it was quite toxic compared to, and everyone else was like super positive. I mean, it was just because like Geordie really wanted to win. And he knew like how bad like we were. So it was like after like a couple matches where Geordie was just like pretty like tilted, we actually were trying to kick Geordie from a team. And then Falcon instead is like he just kept on saying dumb things when we're in the talk of Geordie, trying to kick Geordie. And then he ends up getting himself kicked. It's like, guys, we're not kicking Geordie. And then he just kept on saying like obviously like dumb shit. And then like halfway through the talk we realized we're actually kicking Falcon.
Okay.
And now we're keeping Geordie because we can't kick both of them.
I feel like Falcon's that
And then
kind of
we
guy
get
though, right?
Racehorse.
He just wants to have
Yeah,
like the one liner or something. He wants to just have a funny time.
yeah. But I forget what he was saying, but it was just like he just made himself look so bad in that moment, and I was already like, we're making a change. He's got himself kicked.
The one big thing I think again where maybe things start to sort of pick up a little bit was when you got invited to ANZ Champs Season 9, which I believe was your first season of ANZ Champs. But I just wanted to sort of take a bit of a tangent here and talk about the importance of ANZ Champs as a league in the ANZ ecosystem. Like, is it actually a big deal for a player when they first play there? You know, like for example, the first season you play in ANZ Champs, is that kind of a big deal? Do you feel like, oh yeah, shit, we're in the big league now?
Yeah, it was massive.
Hmm.
I don't know. I think for a lot of players coming up, especially like for players that were like trying like really hard, it's like so cool to like play all these matches that you've only watched on stream. Like you're playing a big team for the first time, or you're playing MDL for the first time, and you're playing ANZ Champs. I think the thing about ANZ Champs was we barely played like best of threes against like good teams. Like in the past, we would just get to play them in like best of one in a
Hmm.
qualifier, get booked. Like we let out 16-4. But in a best of three, you get like a little bit of time to warm up, and then you can learn from that like way easier than learning from like
Hmm.
a quality game where you don't know who you're going to play. Like you can prepare for matches as well.
Yeah.
So definitely a big thing.
All right, well, we move on to 2020, which I felt like was your breakout year, in a sense, right? Because, you know, you probably were on a few people's radars when you were playing in Mark and Larry, but, like, let's be real, it was obviously not a team that was really being super competitive. But moving into 2020 is where you start to kind of get on to some more competitive teams. And the first team that I actually wanted to touch on was Airborne, which we've already talked about a little bit with PZ going to play on Airborne. So there's obviously already a link there. But first of all, I was looking through your Twitter, and there was a tweet that you made where you said something along the lines of like, Roflko has abandoned me. After a year of playing with Roflko, he's abandoned me, leaving me a free agent. So what's the story behind this? Did he just decide to stop playing, or did you guys decide to split ways? What happened? Because you then went like basically LFT.
Um, I'm not actually. Oh, okay. Yeah. So I think around that time, we're trying to play on a team. It was like me, Roflko, Bexite, Dreams, and Rewa. I think you like talked about it, like
Yep,
a little bit before.
buckets or
Um,
something.
yeah. Declan, he was just sorry, Vexite, he was just going like up like rung by rung. Like he just kept on improving his team. So like
Mm,
he left us, he couldn't even play matches with him. Um and then I think James decided to quit. Um because for me, the whole time until the end of like his run in Vertex, like I didn't want to play with he had a spot on every team that I ran. Um just because of like obviously in the end he started sorry like after the start he started improving a lot and it was like one of our better players for sure, but he was just like had such a good impact on the team culture. I feel like me and James could always set the team culture, and it would always be like a good time if me and James were on the team,
mm,
for us at least. So uh basically James decides to quit. I'm like, okay, like I want to play with Jordy again. I think Jordy always uh like me and Jordy have always played together.
mhm,
Um, and I think Jordy joined that team and they did like pretty well in like an LPL season. I think they came like second or they won it.
mm,
But then they were getting like relegated from MDL. Like they were about to get relegated from MDL. I'm like, Jordy, just get me on the team. Like, let me cooperate. It's gonna be sick. And then I was just like telling him that like every day in TeamSpeak for like a week. And then eventually it was the only roster move Jordy's actually like pushed through or like been involved with. He had to get like a player kicked so I could join the team. Um, but those players were like way better than any players I'd played with before, like especially Smoothcrimp,
mm,
um, Swede and Swede, like they were like really, really good. And Jordy, obviously, as I said, he was good the entire time since we played with him.
mm,
Um, but yeah, it was definitely an interesting team. Um, it was the first team and probably the only team I'd actually joined as like an outsider.
yep,
Like it'd always been my team before that,
mm,
and I didn't like fully get along with like some of the players. Um, but it was like really good. Like we had like a lot of like structure, which was good because I always like to play like a lot of like pace changes
mhm,
around that time. And like we wouldn't like when I was trying to get results in Airborne, we weren't trying to like get better and like play super defaulty. Like we're trying to just like win like every scrim we played, every game we played, we're just playing to win. We had a lot of like niche strategies, which other teams just like weren't playing against. So I think we came like top 4 and we got unrelegated from MDL, which is like I've just felt like super happy that I could help a team like this.
Yeah, I mean that's the one
Yeah.
thing that I wanted to sort of mention, and this is why I kind of say it's like almost your breakout year that kind of put you, and I think also PZ on the map a little bit. It's because of that result in ANZ Champs where you finished top 4. I can't remember. I think it was season 10. Was where you guys sort of made this run, and you got knocked down into the lower bracket pretty early on in the piece, if I remember rightly. But then it was like a big lower bracket run where you made it into the top 4, and then obviously that means you're in playoffs/finals, whatever you want to call it, and ultimately you lose to Avant. But at the time, Avant was like very, very clearly considered like a top 4 team quite easily, and you guys had sort of made this like not miracle run per se, but like underdog run through the lower bracket, and that was kind of the first team I think where I, at least, and maybe some of the other guys that were casting at the time, sort of said, okay, these guys like Brace and PZ and the other players on this roster are kind of legit and could kind of be like players of the future, if that makes sense. So do you sort of feel like maybe this deep run was like where you kind of came onto people's radars? Do you feel like this was like a breakout moment for you and for PZ, or did you not even really consider that or think about it at all?
Yeah, I thought it was a pretty big achievement making top 4 at a time.
Mm.
I was like, from how bad my setup was in Sydney, and how like what my stock was in the community, making like top 4 was like insane.
Yeah.
And I think at the time I put a lot of work into like anteing. It's so easy to ante like horrible teams. Um, so like we were just like some teams that just like 4-1 every round and like they'd always change the util. Like you could just tell like snap from spawn. It's like okay, like it's A for sure. Um, but yeah, I think it was a really good result. I I can't remember exactly, but I think I joined the team like halfway
Yeah,
through,
you
and we're
weren't there
already in
from the
like the
start.
lower bracket or the
Mm.
second stage, and I
Yep.
think we won every game through that lower bracket. We beat like Paradox, Rooster,
Yeah, good teams.
and then I
Ground
think we
Zero, I
even
think, as
won.
well, maybe.
I think we beat GZ, and there was a seeding match after, which like we kind of like we just like weren't playing like as good as
Classic seeding
before.
match things, right?
But we come in like 3rd seed in that tournament. Like I think Order, Renegades or Greyhound they weren't playing.
Yeah.
Like Order and Avant they like qualified through the first bit, and then we come 3rd. But for some reason in that season, whoever came first, uh, out of the first bracket, they got to choose who they
Yeah.
played.
Yeah.
So Avant and like this is like a problem we had for ages. Avant would always just like mega roll us. Like they didn't care about like trying to like play properly in these matches. They were just trying to run at our players.
Hmm.
And so they pick us and they just whack us in the finals.
Yeah.
But it was still pretty good. Like we made top 4. And I think that was during like COVID. So the thing was like we would have made the LAN
Yeah.
like in our heads. Which was like a goal of all our teams. Trying to play a team LAN was like the big goal when we're
Yeah.
playing in Markanari, for example.
Yeah, actually, in
Yeah.
the context of that, like your career is a little bit sad in a way because, like, when you started to actually come up and qualify for these top 4 events, like, it was too late for them to be lands. Like, COVID had already hit, and then it took obviously a little while for you then to even start to get the opportunities to go overseas. But anyway, we're a little bit before that. So let's talk about Bantz as well, because it seemed like you played on Airborne for a little bit, and then you left Airborne or quit, or I don't know what happened there. Either you got kicked or you left, or you weren't playing on that team. And then you end up on Bantz, which is like almost like a run it back roster. You've got Brace, you've got Roflko, you've got Falcon, and then obviously Addict and Motion as well in this Bantz roster, which doesn't last for a huge amount of time before you obviously got picked up by Vertex. But talk to me about linking up with Roflko again, how you left Airborne, or what happened there.
Yeah. So I think we were getting good results, and I liked playing on Airborne because like the level of CS. But I kind of missed having a team culture I enjoyed, and especially at that time, it was like the only things you couldn't go outside, so you're just spending all your time with your team. And I can just say it, I just like don't get along with like Sweet as a person. I think he's a really good player and like teammate, but there was something about him I just like I couldn't play on a team with him.
Sure.
And the rest of the team, I think I did a talk. I was like, because we're scrimming all the best teams. All the best teams wanted to scrim us when I was on that team. Like would be scrimming Greyhound constantly, would be scrimming Avant. I was like, look, I think like we can add like a lot of like team structure, but I think realistically, like if we're not like putting in like individual work and watching like, I think I said like a demo a day, like at least, because I thought that was like a very like little amount. It'll take you like half an hour.
Hmm.
Um, like I don't think we can beat these teams consistently. Um, and then basically Smooth Crim, he was always just playing for fun, and he was our best player, him and Jordy. He was like, I don't think like that's something which interests me. I just want to play for fun.
Hmm.
And I was like, all right, if I'm playing for fun, there's fucking no chance I'm playing on this team. Um, and I kind of had it in my head that I was gonna eventually lead, so I actually built the Bantz roster while I was on like Airborne.
Hmm.
I found like Addict through like frag movies. Like he just posted his frag movies, and I was like, this guy kind of looks like Jordy and how calm he is for like the level of experience he has. He had really like clean aim, and I always just like liked players that were like that. And I was like,
Okay.
you guys should try out this guy for sure. And then I think they had Klebs before they had me. And then Motion we were kind of his friends with. So I think I left Airborne. I left Airborne, and then the next match they played, they beat Renegades, and I was like, oh, this is like
Was
quite
that when they were
depressing.
truckers with attitude? I feel like that was,
Yeah,
yeah.
that was when we were truckers. We were
Mm.
scrimming before I left. We were scrimming Renegades like twice a day for 2 weeks in a row. Like they just kept on booking us,
Mm.
and then I was like, nah, like I just don't think we're gonna like be able to like improve.
Mm.
Like I'm gonna leave. The next match they played, we beat Renegades. I'm like, fuck. But I joined Bantz, um, and it was kind of like, yeah, it was like a full run at back roster. It was just the roster we had that entire roster of an addicts. I think the year before at the end of the year, but we had Vexite instead of addicts,
Mm.
and we weren't practicing. So we played on that roster, and it was really fun again. But I think at that time, that was when James became a Roflko. That was when he became a really strong performer, especially like against every team we played against. Like even if we were playing like Order or like Renegades at the time, which were way better than us, James would always like deliver impact and like drop numbers. So James was like hyper carrying this team. That was like insane. Like if you go back and watch his games, it's like he's on like 30
Mm.
kills, everyone else is on like 7. Um but he wanted to obviously play with better players. I wanted to play with James, and I could tell James like I thought he wanted to play on like a better team with better players, and I also thought like I don't think he would enjoy playing like that forever.
Mm.
Because it was losing some of his games was so frustrating. It was like James would have like 25 kills, would be playing Avant in MDL, and then like Falcon after a game would be like, guys, do you think getting 25 ADR in a game is bad when we just lost? And it's like, Pat, bro, you need to stop talking, or you're
Yeah.
gonna get yourself kicked
Yeah.
again.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then basically me and James were kind of like looking at to going at other teams. I think there was a chance of a time we were gonna join Paradox together.
Mhm.
But we ended up joining uh Vertex together. But James had a lot of offers. He had like offers from every team, but I think he wanted to play with me. Um, that was kind of his priority at the time.
Mm.
It felt like at least, yeah.
Interesting. Interesting that he's so loyal to Brace. And then we'll talk about it later on. But look, the Vertex era begins. Let's talk about the Vertex era, all right? So the Vertex era
Yep.
initially starts as Brace, Roflko, PZ, and then Tensai and Willie KS. And I honestly can barely even remember Vertex playing with Tensai and Willie KS. But I looked into it and it seemed like they were on a previous Vertex roster. They were still signed to Vertex or something. How did this end up actually being the team with those two?
Yeah, so the Vertex before we merged was like Maker, Soju, Tensai, Willie KS, Keto,
Mm-hmm.
if you remember all those players.
Yep.
Um, and me and James joined for Soju and Maker. Um, and we just kept on. I feel like whenever I was like making a full roster at the time, just because like it wasn't anyone's job at the time. I feel like I could just make changes if I thought it would benefit the team in the long run, and I always thought making changes earlier rather than later is good. Um, so basically instantly we just got Jordy and I think we got Jordy in, and then me and Willie Kess. I feel like I didn't like playing. I found it hard playing with a lot of other in-game leaders or people that had an in-game lead at that level. I think they were very stubborn in like ideas that like I didn't agree, and I didn't feel like I
Mm.
helped the team. So we ended up kicking uh Willie for Christian. And then we got Christian, Geordie, James, me, and Tensai. And I think we played with that roster like for a fair bit from memory.
Hmm.
But yeah, Tensai was really good. This is when Addict was like really, really strong in clutches. And I think we were just copying like we wanted to emulate Greyhounds or like Renegades at the time, like so much just because we saw how they were beating all the other teams.
Yeah.
And we were like, we didn't care about beating them. We're fucking smashing everyone. We got no chance. Like let's just like try emulate their style and like try like learn from how they play, and then we can like beat all the other teams like them.
Hmm.
Um, so we tried to play like super like defaulty. I like I like studied like a lot of like how they were making decisions mid round and how they were playing against like double up, how they were playing against like when they knew the other team didn't have up, what kind of like how they were taking map control, and I brought that to the team. There was also like I remember I think Inns posted like a comms video of uh like the Dexter Renegades, and it just sounded like Dexter was like whispering, or not whispering, but it was like very calm when he was coming.
Hmm.
Uh, and we kind of brought to our team, and we just always said like Dexter comes, boys, Dexter comes, and we're like really calm him around, and when we win like any round, and we're like, nice, let's fucking go, boys, we're doing it, we're Renegades, we're Renegades. And it's like, all right, guys, Dexter comes, and we like reset the next round. Um, but yeah, that was the first team I feel like where it was kind of like truckers where we had like a good enough level of players to make mid-round decisions, and we didn't just have to rely on like me calling like
Mm.
insane pace changes and hoping it worked. But we also had players that were like very good friends with each other, and we had like a really good team culture
Yeah.
in terms of work ethic and like getting along.
Yeah, and I think this was sort of like a bit of a meteoric rise actually for Vertex and you and other players on this team, because you'd gone from, like you said, really not being like the top players for the pretty much the majority of your career. You'd had some sort of breakout events here and there, like with Airborne. But I don't know if like when Vertex was formed, people would have looked at that team and said, okay, this is going to be a top 4 team. But very quickly, you actually did start to become a top 4 team. Like you were quite consistently qualifying for things like, do you remember all those top 4 like DreamHack, Summer Showdown, Winter Showdown, blah blah blah, this and that, IEM Cologne, Australia, whatever the fuck they were called. These top 4 tournaments that were happening all the time during COVID, where it was like basically Renegades, Order, Avant, plus either you or Rooster. Were kind of the 2 other ones that were kind of competing for that 4th spot. And, you know, Rooster got it sometimes, you guys got it sometimes, but it was very clear that you guys were like pushing a top 4 position at that point in time. So things are kind of going well. And, you know, the team's on the rise. But what I do want to talk about is where things kind of start to come a little bit unstuck for you guys. And this is where ESIC starts to get involved. So obviously, you know, this was quite big news within the AUCS scene. 35 AU players were banned for quote unquote betting on their games or betting on CS or whatever it may have been for various amounts of times. The first thing I actually wanted to ask you about this, and I hope this doesn't come off as rude or anything like that, but I think a lot of the people that you hung around with were people that were actually hit by this wave. So like Motion, Falcon, Roflko, Tham, a couple more guys that you'd played with in previous teams were actually hit with a ban. But you obviously were not. So I kind of wanted to know how did you sort of dodge this? Because it seems like normally, right, normal consensus would be like birds of the feather flock together, right? So people, you know, people hanging about, you know, these guys are all betting. You'd expect you would probably be doing the same thing. So what, were you just not someone that was like into gambling or anything like that? How did you sort of dodge this ban wave? Were you just not into it?
I remember when I was like in like year 10 at school or something, and like everyone
Mm.
was gambling on like CS:GO Wild. I remember a time. And I think like it was like a classic story. Like I built up my $20 skin into like a Karambit Doppler,
Mm.
and when I lost it, I've never been so depressed in my life. And I was like, I'm never gambling again. Like I didn't care. Like I think I've put like $10 on like $20 on like a blackjack table
Right.
once. And when I won like a friend's poker night, I went to go like gamble at the casino the next day, and instantly lost it. But yeah, I just hate gambling. Like I didn't think it's like bad or anything. I think it's like a big thing in like Australian culture,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not like I never bet on like anything.
Yep.
Um, but to be honest, if I was gonna bet on something at that time, I would have been betting on CS for sure.
Mm.
Because like it wasn't very clear that but betting on like pro games was like not on.
Mm-hmm.
So like think as well, especially with how much I was watching CS at that time, I feel like I like could have not had like perfect success, but I would have had better odds than the average person if I
Mm.
was like studying like all these like top teams, and I was like, these guys are really good on like, if you see the video, these guys are like really good on you. Like it's like a good bet right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, just never bet
Never
on
bet.
CS.
All right, well, let's talk about the impact that it had on Vertex, because obviously Roflko, he's affected, and I remember there was the whole discussion around Roflko very much was claiming like, okay, I'm innocent, I didn't really do it, I don't know why I'm banned, blah, 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 this and that. But ultimately, what happens is he has to sort of take a break, and he inevitably sort of quote unquote retires from the game. So you guys are like kind of shit out of luck, right? Because at that time, he's like like you said, he's like really good. He's like your not I don't know, was he your star player? Was he the guy? Was he the one that was like carrying the team at the time? Because you had like Addict and PZ as well. But he was I feel like I remember at least in quite good form at the time. So it would have been a big blow to lose him
Yeah,
for Vertex.
James was like dominating at the time. I think Christian back then, even though he was a good player, and my eye test definitely said it was good, he wasn't performing like the same, like near the same. I think he was like a really good player, but he just wasn't taking like that much initiative at the time.
Mm.
I'd say Jordy was probably delivering similar numbers, but I actually think for that season, right before he got banned, James was the one like uh carrying, like basically carrying. I think Jordy was making like way better decisions, and he was playing in a style which like benefited the team more. But James was pure like Michael Jordan style, just making it happen. Like he was playing to win the whole time, you know.
Yep.
So when he got banned, it was like that was our best player, and it was also, to be honest, like me and James had been like hanging out like in TeamSpeak like it's a dumb amount for like three years like 2 years consistently at that point. It was like my best friend for sure at that time, especially like during like COVID. Like I think like we would just hang out all the time, any free time like would usually just be in like talking to each other in some way or playing together. So when he got banned, I think CS was like a big thing for both of us at the time. We're really happy with how we're getting better. Like I was starting to perform against, like I was really happy we were performing against better teams. James was really happy that like we're actually like competitive. It felt like we were like not made it in a way of like we're making a
Mm.
major, but we felt like we made it in the sense of like we're getting like really good in AU. Um, so to get banned at that point and lose all that momentum was like gutting. It was like so depressing. Like, and I wasn't even someone who got banned, but like lose James at that moment, you kind of know like it's like not playing in a team. Like it's kind of like we're gonna like talk like a lot less. And obviously like James like all the work he's put into CS, because he had to put like a lot of work into CS. Kind of like how I was saying before, like our base level was very low. Like James just didn't know like a lot of like basic mechanics. He needed to work so hard to like learn all of that. Because it's like, imagine like if you've been putting like thousands of hours into a skill and you just didn't know like some like basic stuff, and you're like, this like
Mm.
changes everything. I mean, you apply all that, and now you're just dominating like all these players that you used to think were really good. Yeah, it was pretty sad. I mean, I think at the time we were already planning to make the change of removing Tensai and getting like Soju, I think,
Mm-hmm.
because Soju was coaching us, and I think we wanted to get him as a player instead. So yeah, we basically had to make like instant double roster move when the bans came in. Pretty
Yeah.
sad.
What's your hindsight perspective on that situation?
Yeah, I think um it's- yeah, I'll just say like I think it was handled like pretty poorly by ASIC, just the communication aspect, how they applied the bans. I kind of like, if people are betting on AUCS, it's pretty like obvious like this isn't really like, even though it's not like explicitly banned, and I know admins was like there was like, literal ESEA admins saying it's okay to bet as long as it's not your game.
Mm.
But I think like it's kind of like you're probably like gonna get banned doing that. I think like the ban's length was like they weren't responding, they weren't letting you appeal properly, and they were just you were just banned for 2 years.
Yeah.
I think like if someone like bet, I definitely think it was like valid like some of them, but if it was like a 3 month ban or something, or like a 6 month ban,
Yep.
but like even the fact that like it was like a year minimum from I could be wrong on that, but it felt like most
I think it
people
was
were
12
like a
months at
year at
least.
least.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was just like admins were saying it's okay. Like I get it. Like if like I'm betting on like a truckers game when I'm like back when I was on Justice. Like yeah, like I know Geordie. Like that's like probably not on. But like I don't think I should have got banned for like a year because of that.
Mm.
If I did that, just because of the incompetence of the people around the scene at the time.
Yeah, I think a lot of it was like the context was missing, and it was just like, okay, here's a 12-month ban, here's a 24-month ban, here's like 4-year ban. Like, oh, okay, I guess I guess my career's done at that point. For like, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how much people were betting. You know, like I was not involved in this at all. I was not involved in like the betting circles or anything like that. But like, let's say you're putting down like $20 on some Aussie team to win, and you're playing on some other Aussie team. It's like, well, I don't know. Does that really, is that like, is that like really super nefarious? Like, I mean, it's probably, it's a gray area, definitely. But it's like, I don't know about.
I can say 100% that happened. There was one player who put one bet down
Mm.
on an Australian team. It was like $20. He got banned.
Yeah. So contextually, I think you go, all right,
Yeah.
3 months, warning, whatever. Don't do
Yeah.
it again. If you do it again, then it's anyway. But let's move on from that. Let's move on to greener pastures. So the next sort of roster change that I actually wanted to talk about was Roflko's return. Because obviously, as we briefly mentioned, he sort of claimed innocence, and I think he went through this process. I don't know. I haven't actually spoken to him about it. Maybe you have a bit of a better insight as to what all went on behind the scenes, but we don't necessarily have to go into it too much. But the TLDR is that he was allowed to come back and play after, I think it was a period of like a few months, it might have been 3-4 months, something like that. But alongside that change, you also added Apocdud to the roster. So it was now Brace, PZ, Addict, Roflko, Apocdud. And this is sort of after a bit of a period of turmoil, obviously, with the ESIC ban and changing players in and out, and Soju comes in, and etc., and all this kind of stuff. But you come back, and this is like, I feel like when I look at this, I'm like, this is the first like crack at it again. You know what I mean? Like we've gone through a bit of turmoil. Now we're back onto looking like a good core five. It looks like the team that you want to play with. So first of all, let's talk about Apocdud. I think we kind of know why Roflko comes back into the roster, but why Apocdud? Why was he picked up at the time?
So I think you're talking about like the top four tournaments. But a big thing for us was beating like Chiefs. Because I think Chiefs were getting, and like the genuine like core were getting like better results than Rooster at the time, a fair bit. Or they're just like better at beating the lower teams, so they're always getting the fourth spot. And Chiefs were like, I always looked up to like Tom, and we would always just ask him for advice. Just because we were like, bro, genuine play super strategy. Like they don't have the best players, but like they're like beating like Order and like Chiefs on like land. Or like they're like winning maps, and we're like, that's sick. Like we should ask. And then Tom's always been really nice, like me and James specifically. Like we always used to ask him for advice. I think I had a friend who played on his team as well, so I kind of like had like an insight of how they played. Um, but we actually were playing with Your Wombat, because of the bans. We had like Your Wombat as like a permanent fourth, for like Hindsight, and we wanted to get Apocdud as a fifth. Um, and this is after like Tom had just been offering everyone on my team from like back when I was Tensei to join Chiefs as their fifth because they couldn't get a replacement other than me. He would just ask everyone to play because he was a caller. I
Yep.
never got the offer. There's a group chat on Twitter with me in it, all of my team and Tom just like makes the group chat, says like, "Hey, would anyone like to join? Would anyone like to join Chiefs? Oh fuck, I didn't mean to invite you, Toby." And I was like, that's fucked up. But anyway, we're convincing Tom to join, and basically, we knew like James had been like trying to like push for an unban because it was pretty fucked, the whole situation. But we never expected to actually go through. And then as we're about to get Tom, James finds out he's gonna get unbanned. And I think obviously, yeah, I think this was like the best this was like when our team got like a lot better and we started being like competitive in a like we could actually like get rounds
Mm.
and like get close on maps, probably always choke them out, but like two Greyhound, like we weren't just getting stomped because we didn't have like five players who were like individually capable. Because I definitely think as a thing in the past. But I do think it was pretty sad because we like really wanted to play with Your Wombat. We felt like he would have been like pretty good.
Mm.
Um, and it was just like someone I'm really good friends with now. Like he's my roommate at the moment. And he has been for a long time. But yeah, like getting Tom was like a massive thing for us. he like knew exactly like how we wanted to play all the time, and we never had someone playing like or I don't know how to say. It's kind of like the impact spots on both sides as a, like a rifler.
Mm-hmm.
We call it like the map control guy on T side. He's like going at like middle mirage or like nuke is like the one using the walls like when it's solo,
Mm-hmm.
or like taking banana on inferno.
Yep.
And then on CT, the idea originally was for him to play the main spots, but when we tried it, we just swapped it back to me. But I always, for a long time, I really like wanted to get a player to play those impact spots so I didn't have to. Because I think at the time I just wasn't that confident in my own like ability to do the role and like like frag output. I knew I could like do the role and like I'd have an impact the team in terms of like calling, um, and stuff like that. But I didn't think like I was gonna get like 30 kills playing like Connor Mirage. So
Yep.
it was like pretty big bringing out to bring in Tom. He also like just had like a really good work ethic, and he knew how to like bring a structure to a team. And it was something we just like worked out together because he was really good at bringing like a lot of set rounds, and we were very defaulty at the time, and we had like a lot of like mid-round decisions, like mid-round protocols, and we're really good at making mid-round decisions. Whereas Tom's teams like that wasn't their strong suit. Their strong suit was like having good
Mm-hmm.
like good executes and building like a T side of like having like really good masking. Whereas before we played like a lot of rounds which had very similar pacing. Um, like we're always hitting at like 40 seconds or under. Unless we're like rushing gyro.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I actually wanted to ask you a little bit about having Apocdud in the team just from that in-game leadership perspective, because you did mention like you didn't really enjoy playing with someone else who was like an in-game leader or had taken that role in previous iterations of your team or with previous individuals. So what was it that made him different, right? How did it work? Or was there like a little bit of a clash? Because I've always seen him as someone who's like very similar to you in a sense that a lot of the teams that he's been on have sort of felt like his team in a way. Like he's built teams, he's been involved in teams from a leadership perspective a lot of the time, a lot of his career.
Yeah. I think the difference is Tom is actually like a good caller. Like and is a good player. I didn't think the previous in-game leaders I'd played with, or like the players who like used to be callers, but I was also on my team. I just didn't really, I didn't think they were thinking rationally, and I thought they didn't know how to win.
Mm,
Um, but I thought Tom knew how to like, maybe it's not like the same level as like I don't know if like Dexter was on the team, you know. But like I think Tom knew how to win, and like, and it was like thinking like very rationally all the time. Um, and I was like always down to try something like he wanted to do, and he was like, honestly, I think a lot of credit goes to him with how it would have been very jarring playing on his teams compared to playing on our teams and like not being a caller. Because I actually coached very briefly, I coached the Genuine slash Chiefs team for about like 2 weeks, and I was gonna do it full time, but I
mm,
ended up joining Truckers instead. Um, but I saw how like their teams were running. Tom was like doing everything, and now in comparison, it was like he would like call like his map control, but I'd call like the overarching ideas and around, and I'd like kind of micro everyone else, but I'd never micro Tom. I kind of let him do whatever he wanted to do. Um, and I think it was just like as a rifler, it was like Tom was actually playing like really really well, which
mm.
we didn't know how it was gonna go because usually he'd been AWPA like IGL, and now it's just going from like to like star rifler slots, like entry fragger almost.
Mm.
Yeah, I think it was good.
Yeah, yeah. Obviously, it did look good actually when I was watching this roster, and I'm looking back in hindsight at some of those results, and I feel like this is the roster where you went from just being like a top four team and kind of fairly consistently being in and amongst that discussion to now actually almost being close to qualifying for international spots. There's one or two in particular which ESL Pro League Season 15 qualifier you just missed out on. I think you lost the final map 16-14 to Order. Then there was like a DreamHack Anaheim loss to Order again, which was a close 2-1. So I can already see
Yeah.
from your reaction. But I wanted to ask you, were these kind of results like quite tilting for the team? Because it had felt like, you know, with you and the trajectory of your career, you'd always very quickly gone from like strength to strength to strength to strength. Like you've been on a fairly quick trajectory upward, and you get to this point now where like the next thing that you need to kind of make the next step is to play an international event. and you're just not being able to qualify for these. So was there ever like a period, because this was quite a long period as well, where you were playing with this roster, but these are just a couple of examples of this. Was there ever like a not tilt or maybe frustration is a better word, that like the headway maybe had slowed down a little bit?
I think at the very end, for sure. But I do think it sucked, like, losing some of his games. But we also looked at, like, order, for example, or, like, because it was usually I feel like I don't know exactly what was happening in the tournaments, but I feel like we couldn't really compete against Direwolves as much. I think we beat them a couple of times, but we could beat Order for sure. But we also understood, like, Order were getting like, Order were all playing full time, which we weren't all playing full time at the time.
Mm.
Um, and they just had, like, insane players. Like, it was again, like, this is when we started to, like, not respect, like, all the players. Not in a bad way, but, at the very start, we were like, "Bro, they have, like, Ustili, they have Ricky, they have, like, I forget if it was, like, Declan or Ali when we had Tom.
Mm.
Um, but oh, sorry, Vexai Ali. Um, but we felt like we could beat Order. Not all the time, but we felt like we could upset them. Um, and I think just the whole time, even when we had, like, 10 side, we could win maps off Order for some reason. Not consistently, but, like, we could fluke one. But especially with Tom on the team, Tom's also, like, really positive. He kinda, like, fed into, like, the culture, and we just always felt like we were improving.
Mm.
Um, and the first game we lost, even though, like, it was, like, it was really rough when we lost that. I remember that 16-14 lost to Order,
Yeah.
and it was, like, we lost, like, a 4v2 at 15-14, um, after, like, a massive T-side comeback on Ancient. Because I think Ancient was a new map there,
Mm.
and we just thought any map which is new benefits us. Like,
Mm.
it's like, these guys have been playing fucking Mirage for 10 years. Like,
Yep.
we want maps like everyone's been playing for 3 months on. Um, but yeah, it was, like, good that we were making it into the finals and we're, like, getting close to qualifying for events. But this was kind of a period where you kind of realize it's like, wait, we can actually, like, if we, like, get, like, this much, like, a tiny bit better, or we find, like, an extra edge, we can be the ones, like, not only, like fluking, like, maps or, like, getting close, we can be beating these teams, like, over half the time, and we can, like, be, like, deserving to, like, get these spots if we get, like, a little bit better. And I think that's what happened at the end, when I wanted to basically, like, make the change to get Liam in. I was like, we had, like, a I don't I couldn't, like, pinpoint exactly why, but we choked, like, a lot of bad game, like, would get close and then would lose the ante, or, like, would just would just make, like, really bad, like, individual mistakes, like, would lose, like, a bad clutch.
Mm.
Um, and it wasn't just versus I think it wasn't just this order, but it would happen, like, sometimes even against Renegades. But I think at the time, you could catch Renegades on days where, like, they didn't care about the game,
Mm-hmm.
um, and, like, we were, like, so bad, but it would be up, it would be, like, 12-12, like, anyone can win the game at that point.
Yep.
Oh, like, 13-13, and would always, like, lose, like, would always lose the ante at that time. Um, and I think bringing in oh, yeah, anyway, like, we'll get into it later,
Yeah.
but bringing in another player, like, would kinda help with that and change our mentality a little bit.
Well, it's almost like you're reading my notes, because that is actually the next topic that I wanted to talk about was Malta, because you talked about getting I don't know, it's not an X factor necessarily, but like changing things up, getting a new player, getting something that would be beneficial for putting you over the line. And obviously in February of 2022 is when Malta kind of became available. He became a free agent, and it seemed like Vertex just like jumped on that straight away, because I remember casting the rivalry, whatever the fuck it was called.
If the order tournament?
Yeah, the order
I think
tournament.
I
Yeah,
remember it.
yeah,
Yeah,
because you were
yeah.
there as well. We had Malta
Yeah,
one day, I think, and then we had you the other day. And I'm pretty
yeah,
sure this was before Malta had joined Vertex officially, but after he had left Renegades. And I remember
yeah.
talking to him like, are you still playing, or like, what do you want to do? Are you going to go back to Sydney, whatever? And he was like, yeah, I think I'm pretty much going to join Vertex, but it's like not no, don't tell anyone, sort of thing. So it seemed like you guys very quickly jumped on that. So I wanted to sort of know why was that change actually made? What kind of difference did you want Malta to make? What kind of difference did he make? And why was Addict removed? Was it because of the fact that, as you mentioned earlier, he wasn't really taking a lot of initiative? Because I remember this is even actually something that's been brought up even like more recently, where you know, in hindsight, people have said, you know, Addict's great. Now, especially now, he's taking a lot more initiative. I feel like this particular word, initiative, is always brought up in relation to Addict. So is that kind of the crux of it?
Yeah, I think just going back to like why I don't think we instantly jumped on Liam. Uh,
Mm.
it was literally we'd talked to Liam a couple times, but we weren't like close friends with him. Like we were friendly with him. Um, but there was like a month or two where like I just didn't. Why would we ask Liam? Like, there's no chance like we can get Liam. Like, Order will just get Liam.
Mm.
And then it's just like, well, weeks go by. It's like we're screaming orders for roster. Like, no one's like saying anything. If these guys like not gonna take like someone coming from a team that's just been beating him like the whole time, like it's obviously like there was something like wrong. Like I think Liam could have like improved Order, like for example, and just made him like he could fix like certain things about how they were playing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but like yeah, so like, no one gets him. And then the thing I really wanted to change was I didn't want the mentality to be let's like try and improve and it's like it's cool we're getting close. I want it to be like we should win these games. And I think that's something that Liam brings um just in pure like there was what he was as a player compared to the rest of us at the time is like he was like no like we should like he kind of just has that confidence like he believes like we can win. And I think that was like big for people. They'll say like he was kind of like Jordy in a way. He's like very calm and he plays like mid round situations very well. So I think it was like he was just like a really good player. And I don't think he was the worst player on Renegades by any like no, or even close to being a worst player in Renegades when he's got removed. I think it was mainly like an attitude thing. And I think our team was we had like me, James, and Tom. Um, and our team was like very equipped to like make someone more positive, I think.
Okay.
And I think that's like something like that was like our main worry when we're getting Liam.
Right.
It was like, is Liam just gonna like scream at us the whole time? But like, no. With removing Christian, I think like Tom was helping. Oh, sorry, removing Addict. Apocdud was helping a lot with like structure, and it brought a lot to the team. Um, so I thought he was one of our better players, um, as well in that period. So we kept him, and then James, uh, he was like performing really well still. Like he was just like dropping numbers. I don't think anyone deserved to get cut. I think
Mm.
everyone had like a place in the team, but like I'm not gonna cut myself. And Jordy's off thing. So kind of someone needs to make way. And I think for Christian, I just felt like he had been on our team like the entire time. Uh like there was no like playing on like that many bad teams and like being like the carry player on like
Right.
rosters.
Right.
And I always felt like Christian was like really good, but he didn't like he was just like I don't wanna oversimplify it, but, like, he wasn't, like, having, like, any read on the game, like, he wasn't, like, an impactful until it was, like, a clutch, like, he was, like, just, like, a kind of a nothing player, like, a little bit. Like,
Mm.
he wouldn't play his, CT spots, like, he wouldn't, like, get that much info, it was mainly, like, people would need to, like, help him,
Tell him like, oh, you should push
like
now or something like that.
yeah, it's, like,
Mm.
it's time to push, which I think is actually fine, but at the time, I thought everyone should be thinking.
Right.
Um and everyone should be doing stuff, which I actually don't think is true now. I think it's like I think everyone should be thinking, but I don't think you need everyone to like
Be
be
proactive or
trying to have
something.
some god
Mm.
read the whole time. Yeah,
Mm.
I actually
Mm.
think it's pretty bad if everyone's trying to do it.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, so like we end up it's also just role wise. Liam played a lot of addict spots, so
Mm.
we made the change, which I think just like sucked in terms of how close we were as a team. It was just like it was so sad when I had to like tell Christian because
Yeah.
this was the team which was like closest as like all five of us were like in the culture at the time. Um, towards the end where I like kind of like removed myself a little bit because I was going crazy, like just talking to the same people for so long. Um, but yeah, we end up like getting Liam, and then the results start like turning our way.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
I like it how you almost frame that as you were doing Addict a favor by kicking him. Like, oh, you can go and learn in another team and become a better player, sort of thing.
yeah. Well, I literally okay, I did say the whole time, I was like, Christian does need to like go be the best player on the team, come back, and it would just be like
Obviously, he did, you know. So hey,
yeah.
maybe you're right. Like maybe this was Galaxy Brain all along, and it did work. I think maybe you could make that argument.
Waste time.